The cargo bay of the Horizon's Edge hummed with nervous energy as Jake Morrison checked the supply manifest for the third time that morning. His hands were steady, but his mind kept wandering to what waited for them at Unity Prime. Humanity's first real contact with the Caltherian Empire, the species that had crushed 17 different civilizations in the past century alone. "You look like you're about to walk into a firing squad," said Lisa Grant, the ship's medical officer. She leaned against a storage container, her arms crossed. "We're just delivering supplies and sitting in on some talks. Nothing dramatic." Jake managed a weak smile. "You ever seen a Caltherian up close?" "Pictures don't count?" "Pictures don't show you how they look at smaller species, like we're insects." Lisa shrugged. "Well, let's hope Captain Crawford's diplomatic training is worth something. The Council wouldn't have sent us if they thought we'd start a war." But Jake knew better. The Galactic Council had sent them precisely because they were expendable. Humanity was new to the interstellar stage, barely 50 years past their first faster-than-light flight. If things went wrong with the Caltherians, losing one ship and its crew would be considered an acceptable loss, a warning to other humans to stay in their corner of space. The Horizon's Edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Unity Prime 6 hours later. The space station dominated the viewport, a massive structure built by a dozen different species, each section reflecting different architectural styles and technologies. It was meant to be neutral ground, a place where even enemies could meet without fear. Jake stood in the observation deck with the rest of the crew as they approached. Captain Crawford, a man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes, addressed them all with calm authority. "Listen up, everyone. We're here for one purpose, to open dialogue with the Caltherians. They've agreed to meet with us, which is more than most species get. We follow protocol, we stay respectful, and we don't give them any reason to take offense. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the room. Jake added his voice to the rest, though his stomach twisted with anxiety. Docking procedures took another hour. Then came the security screenings, the diplomatic credentials checks, and the endless waiting in sterile corridors while station officials processed their arrival. Jake had never felt so small as when he saw his first Caltherian guard standing watch near one of the checkpoints. The alien was at least 12 feet tall, its body covered in dark blue armor that seemed to be part of its natural exoskeleton. 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows glowed with a faint orange light. When it turned to observe the human delegation passing by, Jake felt those eyes measuring him, calculating exactly how easy it would be to break him in half. The diplomatic meeting was held in a conference chamber designed for species of different sizes. The human delegation sat at their table, standard height for them. Across the room, the Caltherian representatives towered over their own furniture, which looked almost comically small in comparison. Leading the Caltherian group was Commander Zarakai. Even among her own people, she stood out. Her armor was darker, almost black in certain light, with markings that Jake later learned indicated royal lineage. Her 6 eyes glowed with an intense blue-white light, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Humans," she began, and the words sounded like an insult in her deep, resonant voice. "You request access to trade routes through Caltherian space. You offer technology and resources in exchange. Why should the Empire consider such an arrangement with a species that has contributed nothing to galactic civilization?" Captain Crawford stood, his posture perfect despite the intimidating presence across from him. "Commander, humanity may be young in terms of space travel, but we have much to offer. Our medical technology, our agricultural methods, and our willingness to cooperate rather than dominate." One of the other Caltherian delegates, a male with crimson armor, made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Cooperate? You mean you lack the strength to take what you want, so you dress up your weakness as virtue?" "We prefer to think of it as wisdom learned from our own history," Crawford replied carefully. "We've seen what endless conflict costs." The negotiations continued for 3 hours. Jake, as part of the support staff, remained in the background, taking notes and managing communication with the Horizon's Edge. But he watched Zarakai closely. She spoke rarely, letting her subordinates handle most of the discussion, but her 6 eyes never stopped moving, analyzing every human in the room. Then came the moment when everything fell apart. Crawford, trying to find common ground, suggested a joint patrol of a disputed border region. To humanity, it seemed like a reasonable compromise. To the Caltherians, it was apparently an insult of the highest order. Zarakai rose to her full height, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You presume to patrol Caltherian territory? You who cannot defend even your own home system without cowering behind council protection? Commander, I didn't mean… This meeting is over. Zarakai's voice cut through Crawford's attempt at explanation like a blade. The Caltherian Empire has no interest in partnerships with species that do not understand their place in the natural order. She turned to leave, then paused. When she looked back, her eyes focused directly on Jake, though he didn't understand why. Perhaps he had simply been the closest human in her line of sight. One of you will remain here as a guarantee of your good behavior, Zarakai declared. You will stay out of Caltherian space, or the hostage will pay the price for your intrusion. This is the Empire's final word. The room erupted in protests from the human delegation and shocked murmurs from the various station officials observing the proceedings. Crawford tried to argue, tried to reason, but Zarakai was immovable. It was clear that refusing would mean war, and humanity was in no position to fight the Caltherian Empire. Jake felt himself moving before his mind caught up to his body. He stepped forward, his voice somehow steady despite the fear coursing through him. I'll stay. Crawford spun to face him. Morrison, you don't have to. Yes, sir, I do. If someone has to stay, better it's me than you or anyone else. The detention cell was larger than Jake had expected, probably designed for Caltherian prisoners rather than humans. The walls were a dark metallic color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A sleeping platform jutted from one wall, far too large for Jake's frame. An energy field shimmered across the entrance, translucent, but definitely there. Jake sat on the edge of the platform, his legs dangling well above the floor, and tried to process what he had just done. He had volunteered to be a hostage to an empire known for its brutality. His crewmates were probably already on their way back to the horizon's edge, and he was alone in enemy territory. The guards had left him without a word. Now he waited, unsure what would come next. It took 2 hours before Zarakai appeared. She stood outside the energy field, her massive form backlit by the corridor lights. Without her entourage, she seemed even larger, more imposing. Her 6 eyes studied him with an expression Jake couldn't begin to interpret. You volunteered, she said. It wasn't a question, but Jake felt compelled to answer anyway. Yes. Why? Jake considered lying, making himself sound braver than he was. But something about those alien eyes made him think she would see through any false bravado. Because I'm less important than the others. If someone had to stay, it should be someone expendable. Expendable, Zarakai repeated the word slowly. Your own people consider you worthless, yet you protected them with your sacrifice. I didn't say worthless. Just less critical to the mission. She made a sound deep in her chest, something between a growl and a hum. Humans are strange creatures. In the Empire, those with less value do not throw themselves into danger for their superiors. They are simply discarded when convenient. Maybe that's why you keep having to conquer new species, Jake said, then immediately regretted it. Insulting his captor was probably not the smartest survival strategy. But Zarakai didn't strike him down. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. You dare speak to a commander of the Empire with such disrespect. Sorry, that was out of line. Yes, it was, she paused. But not incorrect. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Jake alone with his confusion. The next 3 days established a pattern. Zarakai would visit the detention area several times, though she rarely spoke to Jake directly. She seemed to be standing guard herself rather than assigning the task to subordinates. Jake learned from the brief conversations with the automated food delivery system that this was highly unusual. A Caltherian commander, especially one of royal blood, did not personally guard prisoners. But there was something else strange happening, something Jake noticed on the second day. Zarakai refused all food brought to her by the station attendants. She would wave them away, her expression dark and forbidding. She drank water, but nothing else passed her lips. On the third day, Jake worked up the courage to ask one of the station's maintenance workers about it. The alien, a small creature with green skin and 4 arms, looked nervous when Jake brought up the subject. "Commander performing sacred fast," the worker explained in broken common language. "Caltherian warriors sometimes refuse food to show disagreement with orders from superiors. Very dangerous. They become more aggressive as hunger grows." "How long does it usually last?" The worker's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Until warrior accepts orders or dies. Sometimes they attack whatever is near them when hunger makes them lose control. You should be afraid, human." Jake was afraid, but not for the reason the worker thought. He watched Zarakai through the energy field, saw how her movements became slower each day, how the light in her 6 eyes seemed to dim slightly. She was starving herself as some kind of protest, and everyone expected it would end with her killing him in a rage. By the 4th day, Zarakai looked noticeably weaker. She still maintained her warrior's posture, still projected authority, but Jake could see the cost. Her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. She rested against the corridor wall between patrols, something he hadn't seen her do before. That evening, as station lights dimmed to simulate night cycles, Jake made a decision that everyone would later call either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He had received his standard rations that morning. Military-grade protein bars, designed to keep humans alive in extreme conditions. They tasted like cardboard mixed with vitamins, but they worked. He had eaten one and saved the other. Zarakai sat in what Jake had learned was a meditation posture just outside his cell. Her 6 eyes were closed, her breathing slow and measured. She was meditating through the hunger, trying to maintain control. Jake unwrapped the protein bar and broke it in half. The sound made Zarakai's eyes snap open, all 6 of them focusing on him instantly. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Jake stood and walked to the energy field. He had tested it before and learned that it produced a painful shock but wouldn't kill him. He gritted his teeth and pushed his hand through at the lowest point, where the field was weakest. The pain was sharp and immediate, like touching hot metal, but bearable for a few seconds. He placed half the protein bar on the floor just outside the field, then pulled his hand back, shaking it to ease the burning sensation. "You don't have to eat it," Jake said quietly. "But you shouldn't have to go hungry because you're stuck watching me." Zarakai stared at the offering. For a long moment. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her 6 eyes fixed on the small piece of brown bar sitting on the dark floor. "You offer me food," she finally said, her voice strange. "You, a prisoner, offer sustenance to your captor. You're starving yourself. I have food. It seemed like the right thing to do." The right thing. Zarakai leaned forward, and Jake instinctively took a step back. "Do you understand what I am, human? Do you know what I am ordered to do to you? I can guess it's nothing good. I am to execute you in 6 days if your people enter Caltherian space again. I am to make an example of you to show humanity its weakness." Her voice was hard, but something in her eyes looked different. "Yet you offer me food." "It's just a protein bar," Jake said. "It's not much, but you need to eat something." Zarakai stood, towering over him even with the distance and the energy field between them. "You are either the bravest creature I have ever encountered or the most foolish." "Probably the second one," Jake admitted. She looked at him for another moment, then down at the protein bar. "I will not eat your offering, human. To do so would violate the fast I have undertaken." "Okay, but it'll be there if you change your mind." Zarakai turned away without another word. She resumed her meditation posture, but this time she faced away from Jake's cell, her back to him, and to the protein bar lying on the floor. Jake returned to his sleeping platform, unsure what he had accomplished. Probably nothing except confirming to his captor that humans were soft and sentimental. But he couldn't just watch her starve. Whatever she planned to do to him eventually, she was still a living being in pain, and he had the means to help. Hours passed. Station night grew deeper. Jake dozed fitfully, his internal clock confused by the artificial day-night cycle. When he woke the next morning, the protein bar was gone. Zarakai sat in her usual position, her expression unreadable. She said nothing about the missing food. Neither did Jake. But something had changed in the air between them. Something subtle, but present. That evening, Jake broke his new protein bar in half and placed it at the same spot near the energy field. The pain of pushing through was becoming familiar, almost routine. "You're persistent," Zarakai observed. "It's kind of a human trait. We don't give up easy." The ritual of shared food continued for a week. Each evening, Jake would break his protein bar in half and endure the painful shock of the energy field to place it outside his cell. Each morning, the food would be gone. Zarakai never acknowledged eating it, but her strength visibly returned. The light in her 6 eyes grew brighter. Her movements regained their predatory grace. On the 8th day of Jake's captivity, Zarakai finally broke the unspoken agreement to not discuss what was happening between them. "Why do you continue to feed me?" she asked. She stood at her usual post but turned to face Jake directly. "You gain nothing from this act. I am still your captor. Your fate has not changed." Jake sat cross-legged on his oversized sleeping platform, trying to find words for something he hadn't fully examined himself. "Back on Earth, we have this idea that kindness doesn't need a reason. You help someone because they need help, not because you expect something back. That is a weakness. In the Empire, every action serves a purpose. Resources are not wasted on those who cannot provide value in return. Maybe that's why your Empire has to keep conquering instead of making allies." Zarakai's eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond with anger. Instead, she moved closer to the energy field, close enough that Jake could see the intricate patterns in her dark armor. "You speak boldly for a prisoner facing execution. You keep saying that, but I'm still alive. So either you're really slow at following orders or something changed." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Zarakai made a decision that clearly violated her training and instincts. She sat down, folding her long legs in a posture that mirrored Jake's own. Even sitting, she was taller than him standing. "The fast I undertook was a protest against my father's orders," she said quietly. "Emperor Caltheron commanded me to make an example of humanity by executing you. I disagree with his decision." "Why?" "Because the Empire has lost its way. Once, Caltherian warriors were bound by honor. We conquered those who threatened us, but we did not destroy species simply for existing in our territory. My father has forgotten this. He sees everything as either subject or threat." Jake processed this carefully. "So you're starving yourself to protest killing me?" "I was, until you offered me sustenance with no expectation of reward. No one has ever done such a thing for me. Prisoners beg for mercy. Subordinates offer gifts to gain favor. But you simply saw need and responded to it. That's just being decent." "No," Zarakai said firmly. "That is something more. That is a strength my people have forgotten exists." Over the following days, Zarakai began to speak more freely with Jake. She told him about the Caltherian Empire, about the warrior culture that valued strength above all else, about the countless species her people had conquered or destroyed. She spoke of her mother, who had died in battle when Zarakai was young, and of her father, who had grown increasingly paranoid and brutal as he aged. Jake, in turn, told her about Earth, about the wars humanity had fought among themselves, about the near-extinction events they had survived, about the slow, painful process of learning to cooperate instead of destroy. He told her about his own family, his sister who worked as a teacher, his parents who had never understood his desire to leave Earth and explore space. "You have people who care for you," Zarakai observed, "yet you volunteered to stay here, knowing you might never see them again. That's what you do for family, for crew. You protect them, even if it costs you. In the Empire, such sentiment is considered weakness. Then maybe the Empire needs to reconsider what strength really means." Zarakai made that sound again, the one that might be a laugh. "You are either very wise or very foolish, Jake Morrison. I have not yet decided which." It was the first time she had used his name. Word of their unusual relationship began to spread through Unity Prime. The station was a hub for dozens of species, all with their own intelligence networks and gossip channels. Other Caltherian guards noticed that their commander spent hours each day conversing with her prisoner. Station personnel observed that the human was not being treated with the usual Caltherian brutality. Rumors proliferated. Some thought Zarakai had gone soft, betraying her warrior heritage. Others whispered that this was some complex psychological torture, that she was building Jake's hope before crushing it. The Galactic Council's observers sent worried reports back to their governments, uncertain what this development meant for the delicate balance of power. On the 15th day of Jake's captivity, everything changed. He woke feeling wrong, his body hot and his head pounding. At first, he thought it was just stress and poor sleep, but as the hours passed, the fever grew worse. His vision blurred. His hands shook. The automated food delivery system provided medication, but it was designed for multiple species and not calibrated properly for human biology. Jake took it anyway, desperate for relief, but it did little to help. By evening, he could barely stand. He lay on the sleeping platform, shivering despite the heat burning through his body. Some combination of stress, inadequate nutrition, and the recycled station air had made him seriously ill. Zarakai noticed immediately when she arrived for her evening watch. "Jake Morrison, you are unwell." "Just a fever," Jake managed to say, though his teeth chattered. "It'll pass. You require medical attention." "The meds didn't help much. I'll be okay." But he wasn't okay, and they both knew it. As the hours passed, Jake's condition deteriorated. He drifted in and out of consciousness. His dreams filled with confused images of Earth and alien faces and his sister's voice calling his name. He was dimly aware of Zarakai's voice, sharp and commanding, speaking in her own language. Footsteps approached. Other Caltherians arguing with their commander in harsh, guttural tones. Zarakai's voice rose above theirs, brooking no dissent. The energy field vanished with a sound like tearing fabric. Strong hands lifted Jake with surprising gentleness. He tried to protest, tried to understand what was happening, but his body wouldn't cooperate. "You will not die here," Zarakai's voice cut through his delirium. "I will not permit it." She carried him herself. Jake was aware of movement, of lights passing overhead, of the shocked gasps and whispers of station personnel as they witnessed a Caltherian commander cradling a human prisoner like something precious rather than disposable. The medical bay was bright and cold. Voices spoke in multiple languages. Someone attached monitors to Jake's chest and arms. Cool liquid flowed into his veins through an IV. "Commander, the regulations forbid," a voice began. "I am aware of the regulations," Zarakai interrupted. "I am also aware that this being is under my protection. You will treat him, or you will answer to me personally." No one argued with her after that. Jake's fever broke after 2 days. He woke to find himself in a medical bed, his body weak but functional. Monitors beeped quietly around him, and sitting in a chair far too small for her frame, Zarakai kept watch. "You broke protocol," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "For me." "Yes. Why?" Zarakai's 6 eyes met his, and for the first time, Jake saw something in. The news traveled fast through quantum communication networks, jumping from Unity Prime to the Caltherian homeworld in a matter of hours. Emperor Caltheron received the report while sitting on his throne of black stone, surrounded by advisors and generals who had learned long ago not to speak unless spoken to. "She defied protocol," one of the generals said carefully. "Commander Zarakai has shown weakness by protecting the human prisoner." The Emperor said nothing for a long time. His 6 eyes, dimmer with age but still sharp with intelligence, stared at the holographic display showing images of his daughter carrying a human through Unity Prime's corridors. Around him, the court held its breath. "Prepare the fleet," Caltheron finally commanded. "We depart for Unity Prime immediately." In the medical bay, Jake recovered slowly over the next 3 days. The station's doctors had calibrated his treatment properly, and his human immune system was doing the rest of the work. Zarakai visited regularly, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes continuing their conversations about their respective species and cultures. "Your father knows," Jake said on the 3rd day. He had heard the worried whispers of the medical staff, seen how other Caltherians looked at Zarakai with a mixture of fear and confusion. "He's coming here, isn't he?" Yes, to kill us both. Zarakai's expression didn't change, but Jake had learned to read the subtle shifts in her posture. To execute me for dishonoring the Empire. Your fate will be decided as part of that judgment. I'm sorry, Jake said quietly. I didn't mean for you to throw away your life for me. You did not make me choose this path, Jake Morrison. You simply showed me it existed. Whatever happens now, I do not regret my decision. Captain Crawford and the crew of the Horizon's Edge heard about the Emperor's fleet departure and immediately requested permission to return to Unity Prime. The Galactic Council denied their request, citing safety concerns and political sensitivity. But Crawford found a workaround. He contacted every human ship within 3 jumps of Unity Prime and ordered them to converge on the station. If the Caltherian Emperor was coming to execute one of their own, humanity would at least bear witness. The Emperor's fleet arrived 5 days after Jake's recovery. 20 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not targeting anything. It was a show of force designed to remind everyone of the Empire's military superiority. Emperor Caltheron came aboard Unity Prime with an honor guard of 30 warriors, each one a veteran of countless battles. The station's governing council hastily arranged for the Grand Hall to host whatever judgment was about to unfold. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to observe, some out of genuine concern for justice, others simply eager to witness galactic drama. Jake was brought to the hall under guard, though the guards were gentle with him now. Word of Zarakai's protection had spread, and no one wanted to be seen as mistreating the human at the center of this unprecedented situation. He wore simple station-provided clothing, nothing fancy, nothing that would make him look like anything other than what he was. An ordinary human caught in extraordinary circumstances. Zarakai entered from the opposite side of the hall, flanked by her own guards. She wore her full ceremonial armor, black and gleaming, every piece perfectly maintained. She walked with her head high, showing no shame or fear. The Emperor entered last. He was massive, even by Caltherian standards, his armor ancient and adorned with symbols representing centuries of conquest. His 6 eyes swept across the assembled crowd before settling on his daughter. Zarakai, his voice boomed through the hall, you stand accused of dishonoring the Empire, of showing weakness before lesser species, and of disobeying direct orders from your Emperor. How do you answer these charges? Zarakai stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. I do not deny the facts of what I have done, Father. I broke protocol to save Jake Morrison's life. I refuse to execute him as ordered. I have shown him respect and friendship. Then you admit your guilt. I admit my actions. Whether they constitute guilt is a matter of perspective. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to the Emperor with such boldness, certainly not someone accused of crimes against the Empire. Caltheron descended from the platform where he had been standing. Each step echoed through the hall like thunder. Explain yourself, daughter. Why have you betrayed everything you were taught? Because what I was taught was incomplete, Zarakai replied. This human showed me something I had never encountered in all my years as a warrior. He showed me compassion without expectation of return, strength without domination. He was my prisoner, yet he shared his own sustenance with me when I was starving myself. He asked nothing in exchange. He simply saw a need and filled it. That is weakness, the Emperor growled. Sentiment that serves no strategic purpose. Is it? Zarakai gestured toward Jake. This human volunteered to be my prisoner to protect his crew. He faced death to save others. You call that weakness, but I call it a different kind of strength. One our empire has forgotten. The Emperor raised his weapon, a massive blade that crackled with energy. You have gone soft, Zarakai. You are no longer fit to serve the Empire. I will end your life here, and this human with you. To remind all who witness this moment that the Caltherian Empire does not tolerate weakness. Jake felt his heart hammering in his chest. This was it. This was how it ended. But he couldn't just stand there silent while Zarakai faced execution for choosing kindness over cruelty. He stepped forward, moving past his guards before they could stop him. His voice was shaky at first but grew stronger as he spoke. Emperor Caltheron, if I may speak, The condemned has no voice here, one of the advisors hissed. But Caltheron raised a hand. Let the human speak. His words will not change his fate. But I am curious what he thinks he can say. Jake walked until he stood between Zarakai and her father, though he barely reached the Emperor's chest even when the massive alien was standing at ground level. You can kill me. You can kill your daughter. But you can't kill what we represent. Your empire has conquered 17 species in the last century. How many of those species accepted Caltherian rule willingly? How many resist you every day, waiting for a chance to break free? They resist because they are weak, Caltheron replied. The strong rule. The weak submit or die. This is the natural order. Is it? My people used to think that way too. We spent thousands of years fighting among ourselves, trying to prove which group was strongest. We almost destroyed our entire planet 3 times because of it. You know what saved us? Learning that cooperation achieves more than domination. Learning that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. Jake could feel sweat running down his back, but he pressed on. Your daughter didn't go soft. She learned something that your empire needs to understand if it's going to survive. The galaxy is changing. More species are joining the council, forming alliances, sharing technology. You can't conquer everyone. Eventually, your enemies will outnumber you. And when that happens, the empire will fall because you never learned the one thing that would have saved you: how to make friends instead of subjects. The hall had gone completely silent. Every being present was focused on the small human standing before the Caltherian emperor, speaking truth that others were too afraid to voice. You dare lecture me on strategy? Caltheron's weapon rose higher. You, who comes from a species that cannot even defend its own borders without hiding behind council treaties? Emperor Caltheron froze, his weapon still raised but motionless. His 6 eyes swept across the warriors who had broken ranks to stand with his daughter. These were not young, idealistic soldiers. These were veterans, decorated fighters who had served the Empire for decades. Their defection was more than simple disobedience. It was a statement. You would betray your emperor? Caltheron's voice was low and dangerous. You would throw away your honor for a human and a daughter who has lost her way? One of the warriors, a female with silver markings on her armor, stepped forward. Her name was Keth Ara, and Jake had seen her speaking with Zarakai several times during his captivity. We do not betray the Empire, my lord. We honor what the Empire once stood for. Commander Zarakai has shown us that strength comes in many forms. We have watched her with this human. We have seen honor in their interactions. We will not stand aside while you execute her for choosing wisdom over blind tradition. Another warrior spoke up, his voice rough with age. I have served under 3 emperors. I have conquered worlds and broken armies, but I have never seen a prisoner and a captor become friends. This human fed our commander when she starved. He showed no fear, only kindness. If that is weakness, then perhaps we have misunderstood what strength means. Caltheron's weapon slowly lowered. Not because he was convinced, but because a tactical reality had become clear. If he executed his daughter now, he would have to execute 20 of his finest warriors as well. And that would send a message to every other warrior in the fleet, every soldier watching this judgment from across the Empire. It would show weakness, show that the Emperor's authority was fracturing. You put me in an impossible position, Caltheron said to his daughter. I cannot allow your defiance to go unpunished. Yet I cannot execute you without creating martyrs and dividing the Empire. Then exile me, Zarakai said quietly. Remove me from military command. Strip my titles. But give me a new purpose. Make me ambassador to the human species. If I believe so strongly in this path, let me prove its worth or fail trying. The Emperor's advisors immediately began protesting. An exile was too lenient. It set a dangerous precedent. But Caltheron raised his hand for silence. Jake could see the calculation in those ancient eyes, the strategic mind working through possibilities. If I do this, the Emperor said slowly, you will be responsible for all interactions between the Empire and humanity. Every failure will be yours alone. Every incident will reflect on your judgment. And if war comes between our species, I will hold you personally accountable. I accept those terms. And the human? Caltheron turned his 6 eyes on Jake. What becomes of the creature who has caused this disruption? He accompanies me as liaison, Zarakai said before anyone else could speak. If I am to be ambassador to humanity, I need someone who understands both our species. Jake's mind reeled. An hour ago, he thought he was about to die. Now he was being drafted into diplomatic service between two species that had almost gone to war. I'm not a diplomat, I'm a cargo specialist. You are a human who befriended a Caltherian, Zarakai replied. That makes you more qualified than anyone else in your species. Caltheron studied them both for a long moment. So be it. Zarakai, you are hereby stripped of your military rank and exiled from the Caltherian warrior caste. You will serve as ambassador to the human species, with this Jake Morrison as your counterpart. You will establish protocols for peaceful interaction. You will prevent conflict. And if you fail, if your weakness leads to disaster, I will personally ensure your execution and the subjugation of humanity. Do you understand? Yes, Father. The Emperor turned and walked from the hall without another word. His remaining guards followed, leaving behind those who had chosen to stand with Zarakai. The assembled representatives from other species erupted into discussion, everyone trying to process what they had just witnessed. Captain Crawford pushed through the crowd until he reached Jake. Morrison, what in the name of Earth just happened? I think I just got promoted, Jake said weakly. Or demoted. I'm not entirely sure which. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Zarakai and Jake worked together to establish the first real embassy between humans and Caltherians. It was located on Unity Prime, neutral ground where both species could meet without triggering territorial instincts. The work was challenging. Caltherian and human cultures clashed on almost every level. Customs that humans considered polite were seen as insulting by Caltherians. Gestures of respect in Caltherian society looked like threats to humans. But slowly, painstakingly, they built bridges. Jake learned Caltherian language and customs, spending hours with Zarakai and the warriors who had chosen to stay with her. They taught him their history, their honor codes, their complex social hierarchies. In return, he taught them about human culture, about democracy and negotiation, about art and music, and all the things humans valued beyond simple survival. Zarakai proved to be a natural diplomat despite her warrior training. She understood strategy and tactics, which translated well to political negotiation. More importantly, she genuinely wanted to find common ground. Her exile had given her freedom from the rigid expectations of Caltherian military society, and she used that freedom to explore new possibilities. News of their work spread throughout the galaxy. Other species that had suffered under Caltherian aggression began reaching out cautiously, asking if what they heard was true. Could the Empire really be changing? Was there hope for peace instead of conquest? Jake and Zarakai met with these representatives, listened to their concerns, and slowly built a network of communication. Not all Caltherians were happy about these developments. Many saw Zarakai as a traitor, and Jake as the corrupting influence who had weakened their princess. But others, especially younger warriors, began to question the old ways. A movement started among Caltherian youth. They called themselves the New Honor, claiming that true strength included wisdom and restraint, not just the ability to destroy. They were small in number at first, easily dismissed by the establishment. But their numbers grew. The Galactic Council, watching these developments closely, established new protocols based on what they were calling the Morrison Principle. Named after Jake, it stated that all species, regardless of physical power or technological advancement, deserved basic dignity and the right to peaceful existence. It was a small change in galactic law, but its implications rippled outward. 6 months after the confrontation in the Grand Hall, Captain Crawford visited Unity Prime again. He found Jake in the embassy, working late on translation protocols for a trade agreement. You look different, Crawford observed. More confident, less like a scared kid who volunteered to be a hostage. Jake smiled. I've learned a lot. Turns out being friends with a former Caltherian commander teaches you things. Speaking of which, where is Commander Zarakai? I wanted to thank her personally for not killing you. She's meeting with the council about expanding cultural exchange programs, and she's just Zarakai now, no title. She gave that up when she was exiled. Crawford sat down, studying Jake carefully. You know Earth wants you to come home, right? You've done your duty and then some. You could transfer back to a normal assignment. A full year had passed since Jake first placed half a protein bar at Zarakai's feet. The small gesture that no one had expected to matter had grown into something far larger than either of them could have imagined. The embassy on Unity Prime was now bustling with activity, home to diplomats from 7 different species, all working to establish peaceful relationships with the Caltherian Empire. The changes were not universal or simple. The Empire remained a military power, and Emperor Caltheron had not suddenly transformed into a peaceful leader. But cracks had formed in the rigid structure that had defined Caltherian society for centuries. Trade agreements replaced some conquest missions. Diplomatic talks happened where once there would have been only ultimatums. Jake sat in his office, reviewing a proposal from a species called the Vexen Collective. They had been fighting a defensive war against Caltherian expansion for 20 years. Now, cautiously, they were asking if peace might be possible. The document was written in careful, hopeful language, the words of people who had suffered but were willing to try one more time. They are afraid, Zarakai said from the doorway. She had developed a habit of reading over Jake's shoulder, her multiple eyes processing information far faster than his 2 could manage. They write of peace but expect betrayal. Can you blame them? Your people have been trying to conquer them for 2 decades. No, I cannot blame them. But it saddens me that the Empire's past actions create such barriers to its future. She moved into the room fully, her frame requiring her to duck slightly through the doorway designed for smaller species. I have received word from my father. He wishes to meet with us. Jake set down the document, his attention immediately focused. That's the first direct communication he's initiated since your exile. What does he want? The message was brief. He acknowledges that the New Honor movement has grown beyond his ability to suppress without causing civil unrest. He also notes that trade with humanity has proven more profitable than expected. He wishes to discuss formalization of relations. That's huge. If the Emperor himself is willing to talk about formal diplomatic ties, it is not a complete change of heart, Zarakai cautioned. My father is a practical leader. He sees which way the current flows and adjusts accordingly. But pragmatic peace is still peace. 3 weeks later, they traveled to the Caltherian homeworld for the first time. Jake had seen pictures, read descriptions, but nothing prepared him for the reality of Calthar Prime. The planet was massive, with gravity that made every step feel like carrying extra weight. Cities of dark stone and gleaming metal spread across continents, each building designed on a scale that made Jake feel like an insect. The palace of Emperor Caltheron dominated the capital city. It was a fortress as much as a seat of government, its walls thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment. Guards in full battle armor stood at every entrance, their weapons always visible, always ready. Jake and Zarakai were escorted through corridors lined with trophies from 1,000 conquests. Weapons from defeated species, flags from fallen governments, monuments to Caltherian military superiority. It was meant to intimidate, and it worked. Emperor Caltheron received them in a smaller throne room, not the grand hall where public ceremonies took place. This was a working space, where real business happened away from ceremonial pageantry. The emperor sat on a throne of black stone, his armor showing wear from actual use rather than just decoration. Daughter, he greeted Zarakai with a nod. Human. His 6 eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that made every instinct scream at Jake to run. Father, Zarakai replied formally. You summoned us. I did. Sit. We have much to discuss. There were no chairs designed for human proportions, so Jake stood, while Zarakai took a seat at her father's gesture. The emperor studied them both for a long moment before speaking. 1 year ago, I exiled you for weakness. I expected your experiment in human friendship to fail within months. I thought you would come crawling back begging for reinstatement, proving that the old ways were correct. He paused. I was wrong. The admission hung in the air like something fragile and precious. A Caltherian emperor acknowledging error was virtually unheard of. The trade agreements you negotiated have brought wealth to the empire, Caltheron continued. The cultural exchanges have given our youth new perspectives. And this new honor movement, while troublesome, has actually made our military more effective. Warriors who think as well as fight are proving superior to those who simply follow orders blindly. Then you see value in what we have built, Zarakai said carefully. I see that the galaxy is changing whether I approve or not. Species are forming alliances at an unprecedented rate. The old model of conquest and subjugation is becoming less effective. Even the Empire cannot fight everyone simultaneously. The Emperor's expression was difficult to read, but Jake thought he detected resignation mixed with respect. You showed me this truth, Zarakai. You and this human who fed you when you starved. Jake found his voice, though speaking to an alien emperor still felt surreal. Emperor Caltheron, if I may ask, what are your intentions now? Direct question. I appreciate that. The emperor leaned forward. I intend to formally recognize the embassy on Unity Prime. I will assign resources and personnel to support diplomatic efforts with humanity and other species. I will not abandon the Empire's military strength, but I will balance it with strategic partnerships. And the species already under Caltherian rule? Zarakai asked. The ones who resist your authority? That is more complex. I cannot simply grant independence to conquered territories without appearing weak. But perhaps there are arrangements that satisfy honor while reducing conflict. Autonomous governance under imperial protection, perhaps. Representation in exchange for loyalty. These are discussions for later. It was not a complete transformation, but it was more than Jake had dared hope for. The Empire would not become a peaceful federation overnight, but it was beginning to consider alternatives to endless conquest. There is one more matter, Caltheron said. Zarakai, I cannot restore your military rank. That would undermine the punishment I decreed. But I can offer you a new position, Chancellor of External Relations, with authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire. You would be third in the succession hierarchy, should anything happen to myself and your brother. Zarakai's 6 eyes widened slightly, the only sign of her surprise. Father, You have proven yourself more valuable as a diplomat than you ever were as a warrior. This is not a reward. This is recognition of where your strengths truly lie. Do you accept? I do. The Emperor turned to Jake. And you, human. You triggered this cascade of changes with a simple act of kindness. What do you want from the Empire? Jake had thought about this question during the journey to Calthar Prime. What did he want? Recognition? Wealth? Power? None of those felt right. I want what I've always wanted, Jake said finally. I want species to see each other as equals. I want cooperation instead of conquest. I want kids growing up in a galaxy where they don't have to fear that some larger species will destroy their world simply because they're strong enough to do it. Idealistic, Caltheron observed, but not foolish. Very well. You will continue as liaison between humanity and the Empire, with full diplomatic credentials and the authority to speak in official negotiations. Your government on Earth will be informed of your new status. The meeting concluded with formal agreements and ceremonial gestures. Jake and Zarakai left the palace as the sun set over the Caltherian capital, painting the dark stone buildings in shades of orange and red. My father has never apologized to anyone, Zarakai said as they walked. Admitting he was wrong about us is as close as he will ever come. It's enough, Jake replied. It's a foundation we can build on. They returned to Unity Prime 3 days later. Word of the Emperor's formal recognition had already spread through the station's communication networks. The embassy was flooded with requests for meetings, species eager to establish their own relationships with the changing Caltherian Empire. Jake stood in the central hall of the embassy, watching diplomats from a dozen species moving through, engaged in conversations that would have been impossible a year ago. Kethora, one of the warriors who had stood with Zarakai during the confrontation with the Emperor, now served as head of security. Young Caltherians worked alongside humans and other species, learning that different perspectives made everyone stronger. Captain Crawford arrived for a visit the next week, bringing with him a delegation from Earth's government. They wanted to discuss expanding human presence in the embassy, establishing more formal structures for the relationship between humanity and the Caltherian Empire. "You know you're famous now, right?" Crawford said to Jake during a quiet moment between meetings. "Back on Earth, they're teaching about you in schools. The man who befriended an alien warrior and changed galactic politics." Jake felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I just shared my food, that's all." "No, Jake, you did something much more important. You saw someone in need and helped them, even though they were supposed to be your enemy. You showed compassion when everyone expected conflict. That's not nothing. That's everything." In her office, Zarakai met with representatives from the Vexen Collective, the species that had been fighting Caltherian expansion for decades. The talks were difficult and emotional. There was pain on both sides, memories of losses that could never be restored. But there was also hope, fragile and tentative, that maybe the fighting could stop. "The war has cost us much," the Vexen ambassador said. She was smaller than Zarakai, with 4 arms and eyes that reflected like mirrors. "We do not trust easily anymore." "I understand," Zarakai replied. "Trust must be earned, not demanded. But perhaps we can start with small steps. Ceasefire agreements, prisoner exchanges, communication channels that remain open even during disagreements. And if your empire returns to its old ways, if this peace is merely strategy, then I will stand with you against them. I have already been exiled once for choosing compassion over conquest. I will face that consequence again if necessary." The Vexen ambassador studied Zarakai for a long moment. "They say you became friends with a human prisoner. That you protected him when you were ordered to execute him." "That is true." "Why?" "Because he fed me when I was hungry, expecting nothing in return. He showed me that strength comes in many forms. I will spend the rest of my life trying to share that lesson with others." Months continued to pass. The embassy grew. The new honor movement within Caltherian society expanded from youth circles to military academies to government offices. Not everyone accepted the changes. There were still hardliners who believed in the old ways, who saw diplomacy as weakness and cooperation as betrayal. But their influence waned as practical results proved the value of the new approach. One evening, as station lights dimmed to simulate night, Jake and Zarakai found themselves in the same observation deck where they had stood a year ago. Ships moved through space beyond the windows, representing dozens of species traveling freely, conducting business, sharing knowledge. "I think about that protein bar sometimes," Zarakai said quietly. "Such a small thing, half of an unpleasant military ration, but it changed everything." "It wasn't the food," Jake replied. "It was what it represented. Someone caring about someone else, even when logic said they shouldn't. The galaxy has shifted, Jake Morrison, and we shifted it together." Jake smiled. "I just didn't want you to be hungry, that's all." "That's everything," Zarakai said, echoing the words she had spoken before. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the galaxy move around them, a human and a Caltherian who had become friends when the universe said they should be enemies. Their friendship had sparked changes that would ripple across civilizations for generations. Wars would still happen. Conflicts would still arise. But now, at least, there were voices saying that cooperation was possible, that different species could find common ground. The Morrison Principle was being taught in schools across multiple worlds now. Simple words that captured a profound truth. All sentient beings deserve dignity and compassion, regardless of strength or status. It was an ideal that would take lifetimes to fully realize, but the journey had begun. And it had started with a human cargo specialist sharing his food with an alien giantess that everyone feared would kill him. She didn't. And because of that simple act of kindness, the galaxy would never be quite the same. "I know, but I'm not done here yet. Zarakai and I are building something important, something that might actually change how species interact in this galaxy. I can't walk away from that." "The cargo specialist who became an ambassador," Crawford said with a slight smile. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I, sir. Neither did I." That evening, Jake stood on one of Unity Prime's observation decks, watching ships come and go from dozens of different species. Zarakai joined him, her massive form somehow seeming less intimidating now that they'd worked together for months. "You're right," Jake said. We can't match your military power. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we don't need to. Because we're making alliances. We're building relationships. And eventually, we'll have friends who will stand with us, while your empire stands alone. Caltheron moved forward, his blade aimed at Jake's heart. Zarakai started to move, to put herself between them, but something unexpected happened. 5 of Zarakai's personal guards stepped forward, breaking formation. They positioned themselves near their commander, not threatening the Emperor, but making their allegiance clear. Then 5 more. Then others from different parts of the honor guard. Them he could identify, respect. Because you fed me when I was hungry, expecting nothing in return. Because you showed me that there is strength in compassion, not just in conquest. Because you are not my prisoner anymore, Jake Morrison. You are my friend, and Caltherians protect their friends, even if it means defying the Empire itself. Jake wanted to respond, to thank her, to explain what her words meant. But exhaustion pulled him back toward sleep. The last thing he saw before his eyes closed was Zarakai, sitting guard over him, a Caltherian warrior protecting a human, not because she was ordered to, but because she chose to. Outside the medical bay, the galaxy watched and wondered. Something unprecedented was happening on Unity Prime, something that might change everything. Neither do Caltherians, yet here we are, locked in a stalemate of stubbornness. Jake almost smiled. When you put it that way, maybe we're not so different. Zarakai's 6 eyes all focused on him at once, and for a moment Jake thought he had gone too far. But then she made that deep sound again, the one he couldn't quite identify. It might have been a laugh, answer to getting the ship home. Jake met his captain's eyes, trying to communicate more than his words said. Better one cargo specialist than the diplomatic team. Better him than someone with family waiting back on Earth. Zarakai studied him with those unsettling 6 eyes. This one volunteers. Acceptable? He will be held in the Caltherian section of the station until we are satisfied your species understands the boundaries we have established. Before anyone could protest further, 2 Caltherian guards stepped forward. They didn't touch Jake roughly, but their presence alone was enough to make him move. He glanced back once at Crawford, at Lisa, at the rest of his crewmates. Then, he walked out of the conference chamber, flanked by aliens that could kill him without effort, toward whatever fate awaited him in Caltherian custody. Behind him, he heard Crawford's voice, tight with barely controlled emotion, addressing the Caltherian commander. But Jake couldn't make out the words anymore. All he could hear was the heavy footfalls of his guards and the pounding of his own heart.